Welcome to Recovery His Way. I'm your host, Tom Reynolds, and we're here on the campus of His Way in Huntsville, Alabama. Today we're blessed to be with Don Phillips. Hi, Don.
Hi, Tom.
We've had this great series on All Rise, and we had a great event a couple weeks ago, and emphasizing this idea that, I've experienced in my life by being involved in recovery and helping guys in recovery, how much it blesses us. And I think even the other night in our event, we saw how really the community rallies together and the community is stronger and more unified with this effort to try to bring the saving message of Jesus Christ to those trapped in recovery or trapped in addiction. So the thing I want to kind of think about is, how are we being benefited? How have we grown through that? So you and I have known each other a good long while. Unfortunately, those listening to us and watching us haven't known you quite as long. So maybe you could give us kind of a little background on your journey and what brought you up to being here in the first place.
Okay, well, thank you, Tom. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you.
And it is, as we mentioned earlier, that is quite a long story. So I'll try to keep it down to the most important parts. I was born in an orphanage in Birmingham. I was adopted and brought to Huntsville by a Christian couple. Grew up around the corner from Clyde Jones. Grew up with his son, Chip.
Okay.
Went to the Navy and came out with a drinking problem. And
did the Navy promise you that when they recruited you?
Yeah, they said it was a great place to start. So that's where I started. And I suffered with that for several years, and it was quite a difficult period and embarrassing to my family and all my friends and everybody. But by the grace of God, I was able to sober up and not without help from Clyde, actually. He had been, after my adoptive father died when I was 18, Clyde slowly became my surrogate father. Mm-hmm. And during my drinking in the 80s, I would go in and out of these secular treatment centers, and I would often talk to him about the need for a Christian recovery center. Mm-hmm. Back in those days, they were all pretty secular. But, and then I got sober, went back to school, and I decided I wanted to work in this field of recovery. And I actually did come to work for His Way early on, as you recall.
Right.
As clinical director, briefly. But I was just getting I got my master's, I was just getting my professional license, and I had these big dreams of opening a private practice, and having a big clientele and a nice big office and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And of course, as the saying goes, if you want to make God laugh, just tell him your plans. And so my plans didn't particularly work out right, but as far as I was concerned at the time. Mm-hmm. But I see, as I look back, how all this was preparing me for actually coming to do work here at His Way later on. So I worked in several different rehab facilities and even methadone clinics. And finally I got to talking to Dr. Smith, Sid Smith, one day. And that was back when we were building the new community center. Okay. And he was saying, well, we're going to need new help. We're expanding and all this. And what a great opportunity, because I'd always wanted to, we had talked about the supposed dichotomy between the 12 steps, the sort of secular approach, and the gospel, and how we thought they should be melded. That there's really is not a contradiction. In fact, the 12 steps are taken almost directly from the Bible, and not verbatim, but the principles, right. Honesty, courage, willingness, humility, service, and so on are taken directly from the Bible. And so I came back, and you graciously, that was 6 years ago, offered me a place. And this is sort of the culmination of not only my professional career, but my life. Yeah, as I look back, everything I've done in life, or that's happened to me, as I used to look at it, has been preparation for what I'm doing now, and I'm
Right.
really grateful for that.
Right. Well, it's interesting. So, I mean, you had a journey, obviously, in addiction.
Mm-hmm.
You found recovery initially through 12-step programs and that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It motivated you to go to school and get a degree in counseling and that type of thing and get trained in that. And then you worked. I'm interested, as you began working initially in the counseling field, you said you worked in a number of different places. What kind of roles did you have, and what kind of experiences did you have in those environments?
Oh my goodness. Well, it was pretty comprehensive. Worked at Huntsville Hospital as a behavioral health, a psych tech, they called us, for 3 years. I worked at the Mental Health Center for 3 years as a case manager and as a day treatment tech. I did my internship for my master's at Crestwood. That was another year of real hands-on clinical experience, because there's a lot of those people are substance abuse only, or substance abuse with a co-occurring mental disorder. And then I worked in I worked in a Cedar Lodge and at Bradford. A lot of this was during the day while I went to school at night, because I didn't have any other way to support myself.
Sure. Through all those, did you find those experiences where you feel like you were fulfilled there? Do you feel like things were going well in those experiences? Were they disappointing? What kind of things were you finding as you were helping people through the recovery programs that you were involved in? I mean, did you find a lot of fulfillment? I mean, what were you discovering in those places?
Well, it's a great question, because that's what I wanted to do, but it wasn't really hitting the spot. I knew I was helping people. I've got a cardboard box at home with letters from people and clients saying thank you for helping, and I wanted to help people, but it really wasn't quite, especially when I got into working in a methadone clinic, because
Well, explain what a methadone clinic is.
Okay, well, it's a place where they provide medication assisted treatment, where they get an opioid substitute. It's known as harm reduction. A lot of these guys and women were blue collar workers. They couldn't afford a $200 a day heroin habit without doing something illegal, unlawful, and they couldn't seem to stay clean and sober. So methadone was a way, originally designed as a way to titrate people off of heroin, but it soon became a way to maintain them, and very cheaply maintain people with opiate addiction without the withdrawals and at a low cost. And so it soon became a way of treating people.
What was your experience with that?
Well, it wasn't my idea of recovery.
Right.
Because we always felt like if you really wanted to get off opiates, you could, but it's very, very difficult.
Okay.
And so it paid real good. Made a lot more money than I've ever made in this field. And in fact, that's what I was doing before I came back to his way. I was director of a methadone clinic in Stevenson, and that required getting up at 3, driving an hour, opening the clinic, coming, and it was all consuming. It kind of wore me out. And so I was physically exhausted. I was really not doing what I wanted to do. And frankly, I was afraid I was going to fall asleep on the way over there and drive my car into the Flint River or the Tennessee River.
Right.
And so I had to quit that, and I came back to Huntsville, and Did a couple other things. I worked at Pathfinder. I actually just followed my idea was to rest, but a friend of mine who had just taken over the directorship at Pathfinder, and he said, "Hey, we're short-handed. Can you come over and do a couple classes?" I said, "Sure, I'll be glad to do that." And then in a few weeks, I was sending letters to probation officers, collecting rent, driving the buggy to treatment, doing admits, drug tests, counseling classes, and everything else. I said, "Well, this is it's not really helping much."
Right.
So, but I finally, by God's grace, and you were very gracious, and I came over here, and I knew, I talked to Sid, that this is really what I wanted to do, because it hit all the buttons. Not only do you get the fantastic practical guidelines and aspects of the 12 steps, but you get of course, the reason. That's what all the secular places to me missed. The reason to sober up is not to continue on our selfish little way, but to serve God, and not just any God, and the God of Abraham. And it allowed me a chance to fulfill my purpose in life, which I believe is to serve Christ by serving others.
Right. Yeah, and you've been a great asset around here, and I know the guys love you, and you've done great here. I know when you came back a few years ago, 6 years ago, and started working here. You'd originally been with us for a short while at the beginning, and then left for a season and came back. In coming back, I was interested in what did you find when you came back the next time? Was it different than when you had left? What did you perceive his way look like to you as you returned to it a number of years later?
That's a good question. Of course, it had grown tremendously. There's much more structure. Policies and stuff were in place. You had grown some leaders, Darrell Floyd and Jeremy Mitchell, among others, and which was great because I loved seeing Jeremy again. And he had actually been in my groups. He was here when I first worked here. He was in a group then, so he knew that I was capable of doing whatever it was, and it was great getting to know him, and it was just, it was growing more and becoming the kind of place that I'm sure you had a vision, and Mr. Jones certainly had a vision, and it was expanding physically. There were more residences, and it's just really taken on a larger role in the community.
Right. Well, I know one of the things I'm interested too, in just your perspectives on and where you've come from. Obviously, you obviously have personal experience. You're professionally trained. You went through a standard secular academic training experience. Worked in the secular field of recovery for a long time, and now in this. One of the things I was interested in is a lot of people would view what we do in a Christ-centered program as kind of a less than. We're not the real professionals. The real professionals know how to handle this. They do it different. They do this. You go to a lot of the professional programs, and this is more of a Christian fly-by-night, kind of flying by the seat of your pants. That kind of perspective. You're not the serious people over there. What would you say to that? I mean, you've been in both, obviously heavily invested in both. What have you found in both those? How would you answer that concern that a lot of people have?
Well, that's a great question again. Personally, of course, I've looked at love from both sides now, as the song goes. And like you say, old Joni Mitchell song. I found that I can't say the secular programs did not help.
Right, sure.
I think everything helps. I picked up things along the way that finally it all came in at one time, and God gave me the gift of desperation, and I finally decided to try to work the steps and get ready. I don't know. there's a lot to be said for not trying to be all things to all people. We don't proclaim to be able to solve every issue. And we provide a pretty comprehensive program. We try to help and assist guys with whatever problems they have. But the same is true for secular. They have limited scope as well. And, you know, they say in AA, they say in the 12-step programs, you're there to save your life. But we not only do that in his way, we're also here to save your soul, which is more important. I mean, that's a hard thing to decide. I even now wonder, you know, which should we be emphasizing more? But I think, you know, the scripture says, what profit of the man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? And to me, that has to be the final analysis of what we're doing. I mean, we can give some people a temporary reprieve, but in my opinion and belief, if you don't have Christ, then you've not been saved.
Right. So, last question I want to ask you about here is, you know, you obviously went through a 12-step program and came to sobriety through that, and you've grown spiritually, obviously, over this time. I guess the last question I want to ask is, as you reflect on this journey that you've been on, these last few years, particularly being in His way, how has it enriched your soul?
Well, it's just a joy to come to work every day, and I can't say that for everywhere I've worked, or even many places I've worked. It's a joy. I especially love doing the classes. I can just see it in their eyes on many occasions that I'm relating to them, and they're relating to me, more importantly. And I'm able to bring, you know, practical resources for recovery, along with the message that the whole purpose of the exercise is to serve Christ, to serve God. And that's just, I really feel like finally, at the very, very end of my career, I'm doing something that I'm really prepared and qualified to do. That I really, I'm really fulfilling God's purpose for my life. You know, when guys get clean and sober, the first thing they all want to do is, I want to become a drug abuse counselor. And I try to talk them out of that, because it is not an easy road. You may think it's easy, but it's really not. But if you stick with it long enough, you know, I mean, for instance, it took 10 years to go through all the school and to get a license and everything. Could have been a medical doctor or some kind of highfalutin engineer and really be, you know, soaring up there. But I feel like I'm soaring to the eagles now, because I'm really doing what I believe God put me on earth for. And it's just enriched my soul greatly. And being able to work with brothers and sisters in Christ, that's just an unspeakable pleasure and joy.
Amen. Well, thank you, Don. I appreciate the work you're doing here. And I pray that God will give you a number of years with us to continue to do this, because you're having a great impact, and it is a joy. It's an unspeakable joy to work with you. So
thank you.
I enjoyed that.
Thank you.
And thanks for listening today to Recovery His Way. If you'd like to learn more about our program, feel free to look up our website, hiswayinc.org.